snake eyes for his wisdom. And he's a character with it. He's the magic user in the booth. So he's 18 intelligence, 3 wisdom magic user. So, you know, the way he decided to play it was, you know, I'm just going to do the most ill-advised stuff I can think of, but I'm going to do it as intelligently as possible. You know, so, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to go check out the spooky barn, but, you know, I'm going to be throwing light spells. I'll use this telekinesis spell to open this door, and why are you even there? He goes shouting from the woods. But yeah, that's the kind of game I play, that sort of thing. So, you know, they wound up, you know, they finally made friendly contact with, or more or less friendly contact with the hobgoblins. And, you know, my son walked away with a warg puppy, because he was just determined, and my God, that was a mistake. Let him have that warg, you know, that warg puppy as a character, because I swear, he shows up to Christmas dinner, and Dad, I got a puppy. And you know, he's living on his own. He's 22 now, so he can do that if he wants to. But he shows up with his puppy. He's 8 weeks old and weighs 30 pounds under his arm. I'm like, oh my God. It's like, why'd you buy the large breed puppy chow? So his dog's name is, so now I'm officially a grandfather because my son has got a puppy. And the puppy's name is Atlas. And Atlas is now about 8 months old, and he's sitting, he's like this tall, and his paws are still huge, he's still growing, his head is still too big for the rest of him. And I call him the kaiju because he keeps stepping on my dog and not realizing it. So when we're playing video games, I have to get to my computer, and then Frost comes in and like sprints in, you know, because I don't want to get walked on, he sprints in. And then we have to put a sheet of sheet metal up over the entrance to the desk so that the kaiju can't come back and torment Frost. Because he loves Frost and he wants to be friends with him. And Frost is just like, no, go away, newbie. But anyway, there, that long rambling answer.
Hi there. I was just wondering what involvement you had with the Dresden Files RPG, and if you were considering any other projects for your other works like that.
The involvement I had with the Dresden Files RPG was mostly, a lot of it was just me panicky, sending emails to people of, no, you can't put that in the RPG, that's coming in the books, so you can't do that. Because these guys had dug into the book so hard that they had projected a bunch of things that I was going to write from stuff that had come before. And they were going to put it in the RPG because they're like, this totally fits. And I'm like, I know it totally fits. That's why I told you the book's later. No examples. What are you kidding? I've got a living to make. My son still wants more school. You know, come on. But by and large, there was a bunch of conversations about how the world worked, and that was most of what I did, was talk to them about the story world. I mean, they knew the stuff about the outsiders at the wall and the outer gates a long time before anybody else did, because you know I'd gone through and discussed that with them. And so at that point, you know, they said, okay, we think we got what we need. We're going to go work on it, and then we'll come show it to you. And I'm like, yeah, you come show it to me, and I'm going to tear into it with a red pen, and it's going to be awful. We're going to write all this dialogue in the side margins from Harry and Bob. I'm like, yeah, you're going to write all this dialogue, and I'm going to have to erase all of it, and spend hours working at it, probably. So basically, I'm the old man. And then they send it to me, and I'm starting to read it, and I get out my red pen, and I'm starting to read it, and I'm like going, this is freaking hilarious. I read all the way through, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I don't really have to touch any of this, and no, you guys actually just, you know, you worked your asses off and did a really good job. And it's like, no, you can have it. This is great. This is good stuff. And so now they're working on the Dresden Files Live to do it as a LARP. So you know, just in case it's not nerdy enough to be around the table with your friends, you can also get dressed up in costumes and play the game and like hit each other with Nerf weapons if you want to, and that'll be fine. And I'll still be the one guy who can't play it. But that's cool, that's alright, everybody else will have a good time. I'm the one guy who can't play the Dresden Files because when I play a game, I'm a power gaming weasel. And if you're the GM, Can you imagine trying to GM me in a Dresden Files? Used to use it that way. If necessary, I'll write it that way in the next book. And yet, if I'm the GM, too much like work. So, so I'm a guy who can't play, but it's okay. You guys play it and enjoy it.
Like this.
You guys should do it.
Hello. If you were to sit down in a bar and have a drink with any 3 fictitious characters, either of your series or anyone else's series, who would they be?
Oh my gosh. If I was going to sit down in a bar and have a drink with the 3 fictitious characters from my series, I would, golly, it would not be any of the good guys. Because they just would not think, I mean, for crying out loud. Oh, it would be Lara Rafe and her sisters. There we go. If I was going to pick from somebody else's series, gosh, I don't know. What? Tyrion Lannister? Well, he'd probably be fun to party with, I suppose. But I don't know, the whole nose thing. I mean, because in the books, I understand it's considerably worse. Okay, yeah. I don't know. Really fictitious people, for the most part. You don't want to be in the blast radius around them. I mean, fictitious people have horrible stuff happen to them all the time, If I was going to pick anybody, I'd pick like Peter Parker. And then just sort of hope things didn't go bad. Just sort of hope he didn't get that wide-eyed, my spider senses tingling look while we were having dinner. But I don't know, fictitious people are tough. I'd rather have dinner with real people. Much less likely for there to be any excitement. Because honestly, you don't want exciting for the most part. I mean, most of the things you do every day, you fly out a plane here, you don't want exciting. But so. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing? Just had a quick question. When Harry got the Winter Mantle, I noticed he knew pretty quick how to sling those spells and had the correct vocabulary to do that. Was that something that he got while rehabbing with Mab, or is there like a downloaded, Winter Mantle 101 that came with the mantle? Just curious.
Oh, did he get to download stuff with the Winter Mantle? He got to download a whole bunch of instincts with the Winter Mantle, and then it wasn't too hard for him to stick words on it. The magic words of the Dresden Files are mostly just there to insulate your brain against all the energy that's running through it anyway. So, one word really works pretty much as good as the other, as long as you don't know it well enough to speak it without thinking about it. But he got a bunch of instinctive knowledge that came along with it, which is the problem. I think the entire conflict of being a human being is mostly your brain being in conflict with your instincts about something. I really think that causes most problems that you have, and that's been my experience anyway. For Harry, that's just kind of been magnified a little bit more than normal ever since he picked up on the Winter Mantle. So.
Hey. So we all know you're a big Star Wars fan. If you had unlimited free time and Disney gave you total control, how would you write Star Wars 7?
Ooh, unlimited free time and Disney gave me total control. How would I write Star Wars 7? I would have to start with Solo and Organa's twins. And they would have to be like troublemaking children, like problem children twins. That's how it would have to work out. I think the girl would be worse than the boy. From there, we'd have to get some grumpy old man action with Solo, because Dad still gets to be Dad. Even when Dad's old and grumpy, he's still Dad. So Solo would still get to show up at appropriate points and shoot people first and stuff like that. I would be happy to have, she'd be in the bar flirting with some inappropriate boy and have Solo just walk in and stun him. Get in the car, we're going home, get in the ship. But I mean, I don't know. If I was doing Star Wars, I don't know. I would have to think about that a lot. I would want think Luke, I would have to show Luke as a person who had grown up over many years and been dealing with a lot of problems and had changed his perspective on many things and was a great deal more like Kenobi as a result. But yet he could somehow look at Yoda and go, really, Yoda? Was that really your attitude about how to handle things as a Jedi Knight? And be a little bit more involved, kind of because, I mean, let's face it, Jedi are wizards, and we need wizards of metal, because wizards of metal are fun. And that's how you get wizards involved in stories, and how you make them awesome in stories, is you just can't keep them from doing it. But other than that, I don't even know. It's a screenplay, so screenplays are weird. Screenplays are weird because you have to write them with somebody else in mind as a co-creator, or more than one somebody in mind as a co-creator. You've got to consider what a director is going to do. You've got to consider what an actor is going to do, and that sucks. These other people getting involved. Life would be great if not for other people. But these other people getting involved with your creativity. When I'm the writer, I'm used to being the show. I'll do everything, and I'll figure it out, and I'll have an editor who will come along and desperately try and guide me in a wise direction here and there, to whom I often pay little attention. But when you're working in that collaborative environment, it changes things completely, and that's something that takes skill to learn how to do and learn how to deal with. And I don't want to learn how to do it with other people. I want to do my own thing.
Hi. I know you referenced them both, so I'm just wondering, which do you prefer, the musical episode of Buffy or Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog?
Which do I prefer, the musical episode of Buffy or Dr. Horrible? I'm going to go with the musical episode of Buffy just because there was a broader degree of the kind of music that you got to see. So you got to see like the flashback, old school stuff with Lysandra and Anya. You got to see there was various kinds of music there. Plus, I just like Buffy more because it had more history and it was more taking the characters that were being and throwing them into this new movie situation. Dr. Horrible was fun, if only because it was kind of creating its own little world. But it wasn't of the same, I don't think it was of the same dramatic caliber. Although it did have just that ugly downer of an ending, which was just an awesome thing. I mean, I was not expecting that from Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. It's like, oh, by the way, we get to the end. There you go, everything you ever wanted. Oh, man. And that's the difference between writing a comedy and writing a tragedy is give people the results of their choices. You always do that in drama. You always give people the results you always give them what they've earned. And the only difference is did you make the right choice or not? And if you made the right choice, then you've got a conventional story with something like a happy ending. And if you made terrible choices like Dr. Horrible, then you get a tragedy as your ending. And tragedy's not big anymore. I thought it was awfully ballsy of Joss to go there on a little project like that. Let me write a little tragedy. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I have a writing structure question, and it surrounds math, but it's not directly about math. But basically, just background, the transferring of the winter mantle from person to person has been the cause of more moments in the books where I see something happen to somebody that I've been following for 3 or 4 books, and then I throw it down, and I go get it. So no spoilers, but that's it. How many of those things are in your original outline because you believe in big beginnings, middles, and ends? And how many of those things are you reading the old books and going, yeah, I could totally do something with that?
Most of the stuff that's in the outline is stuff that happens to Harry. Because one of the Harry is kind of the center of the story. And then the events in Harry's world that are most going to drive him are there in the center of the story. Other stuff happens, it happens in a bunch of different ways. I've got multiple, I've had multiple options of how I can handle things, of who's going to be Harry's, close associate or sidekick during this next story. So that stuff that you're talking about there, I saw coming a couple of books in advance, but it could have gone one of several ways. And the character in question didn't necessarily need to survive. That was one of the options I could have gone with. People aren't safe. I need Dresden, and I killed him.
Which is the happiest ending we've had in a while.
What's that?
Harry's death was the happiest ending we've had in a while.
Yeah, well, and people are like, that was a cliffhanger. And I'm like, no, that was not a cliffhanger, not according to writing structure. A cliffhanger is when you say what's going to happen and then tune in next week because you don't know what's going to happen. Your character's literally hanging from a cliff. That was the end of the story. Harry set out to rescue his daughter, even if it kills him, and he did. The end. So that's not the point. But yeah, I can usually see a couple or three books ahead of what's going to happen. And I knew that something horrible was going to be happening to that character. It was just a question of what flavor of horrible. And this was worst. So that's what I picked. What, you guys didn't know that's how I operate? That's yeah. When I think, okay, what is going to be the most painful, what is going to be the most cause the most emotional conflict within the story? That's the option I almost always try and go with. Now, I mean, that's not where I want everything to go all the time because that George Martin. And I don't want to try and be George because we all have to be who we are, and I want there to be the occasional happy ending. Yeah, I mean, I honestly couldn't tell you what's going to happen to a bunch of the characters between now and the end of the series because I don't know. And their individual fates aren't something that I have plotted out. I mean, I'm following Dresden and the big story that he's following, and these other people along the way, I hate to say it, they're expendable. So, good luck with that. I mean, good luck to all of you. I don't know if your favorite is okay, but I make no promises. All right, Rob.
Hey Jim, I just had a question. Back in the old days, I'm going to say the spoilers, we had a certain revelation that kind of tied the plot of a bunch of the earlier books together in one cohesive thing. Did you have that in mind when you were writing those earlier books? Did you kind of tie them all together later on and get the idea for that as you write old days?
No, that was you're talking about Nemesis, right? Yeah. No, that was there from the get-go, and has been showing up since has been actually on stage since Grave Peril, and there were Nemesis characters showing up in Grave Peril doing things, and there are more of them. More of them have happened along the way that you don't know about yet, which is why that's why it's such a great threat because it can be completely visible and transparent, and you don't know it's there until later that you work out. Oh, so hopefully, I mean. My whole point in writing a lot of these books is I tried to write it so that you would get a different sense of it after you knew things later on. So you could go back and read it again and go, oh. And I try to do it in little ways, in little things, like, I'll try and do little things like with the mouse, when eventually you work out what mouse really is, and you go back and all of a sudden, the scene where he's ferociously attacking Harry Dresden's Snoopy doll is a lot different because you realize, oh, that's the Snoopy doll that's got the Luke-Bruce blood on it from several books ago, and that's what he's smelling, and that's why he's assaulting it because he's instinctively good and awesome. But it's not stuff that there's a lot of stuff that I don't bring out. I try not to shove stuff in everybody's face, and hopefully you'll get a different sense of it if you go back and read it again because I like rereading books. I like rereading a book and going, oh wait a minute, now that I know the ending of this book, this line right here is a lot funnier than it was before. And I know the writer must have been laughing his ass off when he wrote it. And I like that. Hopefully I can try and give some of that experience to readers when I'm writing too.
Hey, somewhat related to the previous question. At what point in the process did you actually come up with the overall big picture? Considering that with Stormfront, it was proving a point. It was just the one story. At what point did you actually expand upon the entire universe?
I went and I handed my writing teacher the first 2 chapters of Stormfront, which was the first one that I wrote. And she read them, and I was waiting for her scathing reply because that's what she usually had. Her responses would range. The way she would begin her replies were always memorable because they would range from things like "What were you thinking?" to "Are you kidding me?" to just rolling up the chapters and leaning over the desk and hitting me on the head. Literally. So when she read those, She looked up and said, okay. And I said, okay, what? And she said, okay, you did it. I said, what? She said, you did it. This will sell. This is saleable quality. I don't know if it'll be the first thing you sell, but you'll be able to sell this eventually. You did it. I did. Because remember, these were the chapters I've been writing to prove a point to her about how wrong she was about what she was trying to teach me. And I was trying to prove that point by doing everything she told me to. And because I'm a freaking genius. I swear, my entire writing career has been me making a stupid mistake and going, let's roll with that, and it working out. But I said, okay. She's like, well, what happens next? And I had no idea what was going to happen next until she asked me. I said, well, I think I'm going to give him this assistant that is going to be like his magical assistant, because, you know, when he needs to explain magic stuff to the police, that's one thing. But when he's got more advanced stuff, then he needs to have somebody he can go consult about stuff, because I don't want to make him the smartest guy anywhere about it. And she's like, okay, well, that'll be so you're going to write this assistant, and that seems like a reasonable next step, as long as you don't make him a talking head. Which is writer speak for a character that just shows up and dispenses information and otherwise doesn't have any particular personality or anything like that. He's just there to show information. And the typical talking head character is, the example they use comes from the old pulp science fiction shows where you have characters show up and say, as you know, the chemical makeup of this shampoo. But if Bob knows already the chemical makeup of this shampoo, why are we even talking to him? You know, that's that kind of character direction it's saying. So she said, don't make a talking head. Instead, I made a literal talking head named Bob. Came back with that next week, and she says, well, you think you're clever, don't you? And I also turned in at that time an outline. She's like, give me an idea of the outline of the rest of the story. And so then I came in the next week with an outline of the rest of the story, and then the 19 stories that came after that one. And I'm like, do you think 20's enough? And she kind of looks at me because I'm not bright enough to realize I'm never going to sell a 20-book series to an editor just off the bat. And she just kind of looks at me, knowing that I'm ignorant, and doesn't want to crush my enthusiasm. And she's like, I think if you could sell 20 books, yeah, you should be doing fine. just completely dry. It's, oh my gosh, looking back at it now, it's like, God, look at those stuff. But on the other hand, because I was too dumb to know I was never going to sell that to an editor, I went and sold it to an editor. I sold them 3 books to start with, and I think they only bought the first one because they weren't going to have to do a lot of work to make it ready. Basically it was like, we got to have some new guys. Who are we going to pick? Well, this guy's thing is practically done. We're not going to have to do anything to it at all. Get him, we're busy. And he's already got the next 2 written. Great, fine, do a 3-book deal. And that was the Dresden Files was a 3-book deal at first, just because I had 3 books written. And then after that, they said, yeah, we'll try 2 more. And by then, it started picking up, and then all of you. But yeah, I mean, that was probably the smartest dumb thing I've ever done. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. I'm thinking like maybe a big trilogy at the end to cap the whole thing off. Sure, why not? Debbie's awesome. she's just extremely cool and always has been. But anyway. Hi.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, so.
Okay.
Maybe two.
All right. Well, first of all, this is extremely impressive because I can remember you coming here to our dinky little Phoenix Book Festival, and I was like one of the only people who came up and talked to you afterwards.
I know, right?
Yes.
I just kind of sat there in this booth going,
My brother and you talked about fedoras for like 10 minutes. But back then you had mentioned the fact that you love to do a lot of research for your books. It's very obvious in your books. Do you get frustrated now because you're on more of a deadline and more of a schedule as to if you can get any extra research done, or if you feel like you're rushed?
There's my editor right there. I still like doing what I do, and occasionally I think I might drive Ann a little bit crazy because I'm not doing what I do quite as on time as I used to. but there's so much more to do in the writing career that's not actually writing now than there used to be. So, I mean, this year I'm spending more time on the road, kind of doing conventions and stuff like this, than I did in the last 3 years put together, and I've still got more writing to get done. So, I mean, it's become more challenging, and it's like, and I'm not a kid in my 20s with energy to burn anymore. And, you know, I've got to think about all these things like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to start eating healthy now, and stuff like that. Bad things happen to my body if I don't. I can't just grab some pizza and go back to work. No, you can't. Eat that chicken, you know. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges to face, and one of them is, you know, how do I manage my time so that I can do the research that I need to do to spend the time that I need to spend on the book to make it good, because the books are just getting longer and more involved, and yet still finish it on something like time so that my publisher can plan, you know, how we're going to do our major projects this year. God, I wish Jim Butcher would turn things in on time so we can predict that. But I can only write it as fast as I can write it. Get it done as fast as I can write it down. I'm doing my best. I guess we'll see what happens.